Hello there! Another Monday, another weekly recap. The video is divided into 3 parts as usual, and we'll start with the tech talk. This week I have 4 tips to share, more than usual. The first is an Algothar Academy, specifically to do with the Arcane Ravager found in the trash area surrounding Veximus. The Arcane Ravager's primary ability is Vicious Ambush, where they select a target player and charge in that direction after a short cast time. The important detail here is that they always target the player farthest from it. This means you can bait it by being the farthest player. Additionally, you can cancel the charge entirely by using the walls to get out of line of sight. In this clip, I stand farthest away from it to get targeted, and hide behind a pillar to cancel the charge. This will cancel their cast entirely, and then they'll continue doing their normal abilities. This means less group-wide damage, and less movement, resulting in a higher DPS uptime. Truly a trick that can make your runs faster. You can also do this with other tools such as Feign Death or Shadow Meld-like effects. You'll just have to use these effects after you're selected, but before they start their charge. The second tech this week is about the last 2 units before Bakar, Bakar and Balara. In a past weekly recap, I discussed a technique you can use to skip them. But if you decide to fight them, you may find that Balara takes a while longer to kill, as she casts Vehement Charge, where she charges away. Well, you can actually bait this charge fairly easily. A little detail is that the charge targets the nearest player. So that means if the tank takes them to a wall, if the tank is the nearest player to Balara, she will only ever charge in the direction of the tank, right into the wall, minimizing movement. This makes it much easier to burn them down, and hopefully results in a faster kill, and as a result, a timed keep. All other players except the tank should try to be as far as they can from Balara. Melee should try to be as far as they can, but still be within melee range so that they can still do damage. Third is in Halls of Valor. I've discussed a way to make it so the wolves before Fenryr never jump, by having your ranged players stand on a little rock. But if you so happen need or want to kill the wolves before fighting Fenryr, you'll need to practice caution to ensure that you don't explode from the wolves. In this clip, I'm the only ranged player as a healer, and I aggressively kite the wolves around. As long as I'm nowhere near the wolves when they finish their pounce, I will take no damage. So your ranged player would just kite the wolves around basically. Of course, this isn't a very good strategy for most ranged DPS, as almost all ranged DPS need to stand still to cast their abilities. So most players might employ a different tactic using abilities such as Binding Shot, Ursol's Vortex, or Ring of Frost. If done correctly, you can use them to stop the wolves in their tracks before they can finish their pounce. Both of these are valid techniques, and you should always practice caution when pulling these wolves. Finally, this one is to do with Shadowmoon Burial Grounds, specifically the Dominators you face before and after the second boss. You may have noticed that Dominators normally start by dominating a subjugated soul. Have you ever had a run where these souls randomly meleeed your players and just destroyed the party? Well, based on some experimentation and community input, it seems that the aggro of the souls is dependent on the aggro of the Dominator dominating it. So tanks will need to make sure that they hit the Dominators to retain aggro on the souls. There's one pack in particular that is quite dangerous. It's the first pack you face after defeating the first boss. You may want to interrupt the Dominator standing at the back, because the one at the back is fairly hard to reach, and often the tank doesn't do very much damage to it. As a result, the healer sometimes takes aggro, and the soul will just wail on the healer. Or sometimes your DPS have AoE abilities that pull threat. You may want to interrupt it to bring it in, so that you can aggro everything more easily. That's all for the tech talk, and now for the weekly update section. There are quite a few things to talk about, as there have been a lot of developments over the past week. I'll start with the balance changes. Razsageth has received a significant nerf on Mythic difficulty, which should make achieving cutting edge for some guilds a reality. Not really a surprise, as in the last few Shadowlands raids, when the next tier is announced, the raid is nerfed considerably on Mythic. A few nerfs have also been announced for Ret Paladins, where Blizzard describes Ret Pally as having overperformed in multiple aspects. I'm not sure I can comment on whether or not they deserved it, but the changes don't seem too large, and generally shouldn't affect Ret Paladins too much. Several guildies who have given it a shot have really been performing quite well, and I think they'll still perform well when the nerf hits. Okay, time for the big one. The 10.1 patch date has been announced. May 2nd is the date. So, from the time of recording, we have about 3 weeks to get KSM, KSH, AOTC, and Cutting Edge. Mythic Plus Season 2 opens on May the 9th, so you better be ready for it. It seems that the raid will also open on all 3 difficulties on May the 9th, so you should also be looking forward to that. And lastly, for live updates, the MDI has recently concluded this past weekend, with Echo taking the win. They just can't stop winning. But, of course, congratulations to them. However, soon after it ended, Nao, a member of Echo, posted on Twitter a Weakaura which basically does the spy minigame in Court of Stars for you, automatically talking to a guest if they have the correct ID or something like that. This has been patched very quickly after that tweet, but Nao has since found another way to make the Weakaura work. If you're interested in getting that Weakaura, I'll link it below next to the blue post about the patch. Okay, now for the PTR updates. There have been several changes announced for the affixes on PTR, specifically all 3 of the new ones and Explosive. Afflicted will have less health and have more consistent spawning behavior, which should help healers who choose to heal them up instead of dispelling them. Not a change I saw coming, but one that is welcome nonetheless. Incorporeal mobs are now immune to damage and spawn more frequently. The whole spawning more consistently is a common theme among the updates to these affixes. I'm not too sure what it means, but I'm sure it's only good things. The immunity to damage is a welcome change, and in its current state, I think it could probably be released as an affix quite comfortably. Explosive now has less health, and when I say less, I mean way less. They reportedly only have 140k-ish health on a 20. A quite suitably low health, low enough that the healer can work on it alone. Reportedly, they also only spawn 2 at a time, with an internal cooldown, so they can't spawn repeatedly. So that's even less pressure on the healers. Truly a set of changes that I welcome, and based on the standard Blizzard seems to be trying to achieve, one that I wholeheartedly support. Entangling hasn't received much changes, beside the promise to make the visual more clear. And that is probably enough. Entangling as an affix was fine enough in my opinion. You just need an easier way to tell that one is spawning below you. Additionally, affixes now only appear on Keystone level 7 and 14 instead of 4 and 7 respectively. I'm not sure about this change. It seems like it should make lower keys even easier than they are now. If that is something that Blizzard feels should be true of lower keys, I'm not entirely opposed to it. I say give Blizzard some benefit of doubt. On PTR, it seems that the Potion of Ultimate Power, the DPS pot, will be tradable and purchasable on the auction house, which means that if you want them, you don't have to set up a work order anymore. Rejoice! This is wonderful news, because it was just so annoying having to make a work order every time I wanted good DPS pots. Not to mention, no one in my guild has this recipe, so I need to go through the trouble of finding somebody who can make it. But not anymore. And finally, for updates, the PTR patch notes regarding classes. You can read through the notes yourself to keep an eye out on changes for your respective classes, but I would like to highlight the Discipline Priest tier set specifically. It looks absolutely insane. It looks like Blizzard might be trying to give Discipline Priest the limelight next year. The tier set not only significantly increases the healing ability of Disc Priests, but also the response time, as instant cast Radiances is just so powerful. I am looking forward to playing Disc Priest next tier. Very, very exciting stuff. And that's all for the updates this week. And now for the last part, the part about my week in WoW. As usual, I did quite a few keys with guildies, and this week was a good amount of success and fun. My suspicion that fortified bolstering wouldn't be quite as bad as it seems to have been true. At the 20 to 22 level, bolstering just isn't as bad as it seems on paper. I timed quite a few keys, snagging several portals for myself and a few guildie ults. It feels good just to be able to do damage on my Disc Priest. Last week was a nightmare with a whack-a-mole game I had to play. Also got to stretch my Fire Mage legs a bit this week, doing several 21s which were all fairly smooth. Fire Mage is a lot of fun at the moment, and can pump out some reasonably decent damage. It is fairly intensive. I do have to use a lot more focus on Fire Mage than I do on other classes, but that intensity is what makes it so fun. Interestingly enough, I'm not using the Forbidden Reach ring on my mage, as while it does sim better in certain situations, if I were to use it, my haste would drop all the way down to 25%. And while not super critical, Fire Mage just feels super sluggish at anything below 30% haste, so I've opted not to use it. With the season date announced, I'm readying up for the new dungeons and plan on getting started on recording and editing for the new dungeons. Scripts are mostly done, and it shouldn't be much longer until they're out. Maybe a week or two. And that's all there is to share about WoW this week. Thanks for staying till the end. I do appreciate it, and hope you had and will have a nice week. Next week's affixes are Tyrannical, Spiteful, and Quaking. I've seen worse combos on the calendar, but Tyrannical Quaking is quite gross on a few bosses. Being unable to heal during key moments of the fight can and will lead to wipes. It's probably the worst week to be melee. How unfortunate for you melee folk. But as always, keep an open mind. The week will probably not be as bad as it seems on paper. Leave a like or subscribe if you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in my next weekly WoW recap.